So shall we kick off? Let's do that.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Hi, I'm Glenn Poole, CEO of the Australian Men's Health Forum. Before we start, I want to first acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where we all meet from today, both here and around the world, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. To pay my respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and other First Nations people joining us today, and to say that I'm joining you today from the lands of the Gureng, the Garang, the Bunda Bunda and Balai people, in a place that we English named Agnes Water and the town of 1770. 1770, a very significant year, the year Captain Cook first put foot on soil on these lands. So a very significant place to be for those who've been impacted by the colonization of these lands. And that's all I want to say on that for now. I'm really looking forward to today. Where you are is in our Men's Health Connected Men's Health Summit, which has been running throughout June. So this is week 4, and today's theme is Men Who Care. And we've got an absolute awesome lineup to have this conversation with us. Coming up around 2:45, we've got Tom Docking of Dad's Group Inc. talking about the Dad's Groups he's set up all around Australia for new fathers. At 3:15, we have a session called Men Taking Care, where we have men working in nursing, male carers, men who've been at-home dads, and men working in the early childcare sector. But to kick us off, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Martyn Mills-Bayne at the University of Adelaide, who, amongst other things, set up the Australian Association for Men in Early Childhood. And I had the privilege of meeting Marty at his menu conference in Adelaide a couple of years ago, which brought together those working in the early childhood sector with a focus on men in that profession a couple of years ago, and have been following his work ever since. And he's running a session, an international session called Men Working in Early Childhood Education. Where now? Over to you, Marty.
Thanks, Glenn, and thank you for the introduction. I want to add to your acknowledgement of country and say that I'm meeting with all of you today on the lands of the Kaurna people here in the Adelaide Plains, and that I add my acknowledgement and my respect to elders past, present and emerging. For those of those in early childhood, the emerging elders are those children that we get the privilege of teaching and working with. So it is a real honour to stand on this ground and to have so many people across so many different places joining us today. As Glenn said, we met back in 2018 at my menu conference, the Male Educators on the Fringe, back when you could have a fringe festival. I think the Fringe Festival was the last time I actually went out in Adelaide with a large group of people in February, but things have obviously changed for us around the world. So it's beautiful that we have this ability to connect with each other here and to be able to bring to you 4 fantastic men who are doing wonderful work in a range of different areas from 4 different countries. So that's brilliant. I said, and I say this often jokingly, that men's conferences and early childhood education conferences are the only places where I've ever had to line up for a toilet at a conference. But Glenn's conference last year, the Men's Health Forum conference was, or gathering, was another place. I think the only other place where you have to line up as a man for the toilet is the BTS concert. For those that are K-pop fans will get that reference. If not, just ignore it. But it is fantastic to have this focus on the work that men do, and to have so many of our female colleagues support the idea that gender diversity is important. I just want to highlight before I introduce you to our speakers that the Australian Institute for Teachers in Leadership, AITSL, came out with a document on leadership, and it said that diversity is one of the key factors that make good quality teaching in schools. Diversity across culture, across class, across ability, and across gender. So there is evidence to suggest that we need a rich, diverse teaching workforce, a rich, diverse number of adults supporting children's lives, and men are part of that picture. So hopefully you hear some interesting things from our 4 speakers. They have different perspectives. And if you've got any questions, please chuck them in chat. I will do my very best with Glenn's help to multitask. I really struggle with that part anyway. But if you've got any questions, put them in chat and we'll see if we can get some Q&A after everyone's had a bit of a go at talking. I want to first introduce you to someone who is sitting in his room at 4:30 in the morning. I don't know whether he slept. I don't know whether he's woken up early. Who knows, but I'm sure he will make some sense. The wonderful Rob Fox is based in the UK and has does some amazing work under his Active Childhood UK banner, interviewing some real key movers in the early childhood space. He is a very knowledgeable young man. I say younger than me, I'm thinking, Rob, I'm not sure. But yeah, is a real mover on the scene, and I'm really pleased that we're able to connect. We've communicated in a range of ways, but face to face here for the first time. It's good to see you, Rob. So please welcome Rob Fox. You've got 10 minutes, Rob. I'm going to time you. You can do whatever you want in 10 minutes.
Boom. A very good day to you all. Thank you very much for allowing me to be a part of this today. And so just to give you a bit of background of who I am, what I am and where I'm from. I'm based in Cambridge in the UK, and my background really stems, I started my early years journey when I was 15, and it all started off, it was long summer holidays, and my mum said to me, "You look bored, you need to do something." And I have a younger sister, she's 8.5 years younger than me, and I ended up going into her school and volunteering. From there, my creativity was sparked. At 15, all you want to do is keep busy and earn some money, so surely early years wasn't the choice for me. How wrong could I be? How wrong could I be? After many weeks of volunteering, I wasn't put off by the bodily fluids or anything, the snot, the sick and the other bodily functions. I wasn't put off. It was the magic, the pure joy and the interactions that I really enjoyed from day one. It was after 2 weeks I was really inspired, and I'm not a natural academic. I talk very openly about this. I've fallen into academia later on in life. But I started off with my ECE qualifications. I started off initially as an ECE level 2 practitioner, and then went on to a level 3 program here in the UK, which is often referred to as the NNEB qualifications for nursery nursing. And it was either, like I said, not being a natural academic, I was given, actually, you could spell the words fudge with my results when I left school. And yeah, I naturally wasn't gifted with that. But I was given a leaflet for childcare and a leaflet for hairdressing. And being dyspraxic, that's my learning challenge. I talk very openly about my own challenges. And being dyspraxic and being a barber or a hairdresser, I think it would have been more useful in this lockdown period to be a barber than it would be to be an early years educator out of work per se. So I say that with humour. So many years followed. I was never out of work. I worked in a variety of preschools, day nurseries, full daycare programs, school settings, and years went on, and I thought, to be taken seriously, I'd always be questioning practice and often get in trouble for questioning practice and what quality care and education looks like. And it was one day, it was a few years ago, I decided that in order to succeed in this field, I would have to go to university. And like I said to you before, university wasn't easy. Having these challenges of studying and working, I worked full time, and going to classes, going on to online lectures, etc. It wasn't easy at all. But I had a very supportive school. I was based as an early years educator within a school, and I worked for a number of years in a reception class as a sort of a junior teacher, working alongside amazing people, right up until last summer. So I graduated, I got my degree, I got a foundation degree, and then went on and got my bachelor's. And people keep saying to me, now you need to go on and do more. I'm like, no, I'm enjoying the freedom of life. So that was right up until last summer, so 12 years later, and I randomly get approached on LinkedIn to become a regulatory inspector, and that came out of the blue, and I thought, yeah, why not? I'll try that. And I went off, did my regulatory and training, and in the meantime, I kind of got my name out there with social media, looking at the male role model, what the male role model is, and so I did that for 6 months, but in the meantime, I was getting fed up with what the regulatory system looked like, and actually looking at child development in a more detail, and actually questioning them. And then I got fed up with doing the regulatory stuff, and set my own consulting up, looking at developmentally appropriate practice and challenging that in settings, looking at policies and really underpinning how we support educators with challenges. Because we talk a lot about how we educate children, but actually we need to look at how we're educating ourselves and making people aware. It's my own journey to now that's inspired me to get to where I am at. And I think the hidden learning challenges is often a misunderstood aspect. And basically with that, I go into environments now, look at policies and procedures, look at how we're promoting inclusion from the angle of a practitioner, and actually questioning what more can be done, and what more can be done to support practitioners as well as supporting our children. Something I haven't told you about me, I've attended lots of conferences in Iceland, Canada, and I worked in an international school for a period of time. And yeah, basically my experiences have shaped who I am today. And now through my Active Childhood platform online, I work with a number of different associates around the globe. And over this lockdown period, it's been really good because I've been able to connect with so many people, and like I'm doing today, and really just keep learning about early childhood, and keep connecting with people who share the same passion, who get and understand what you've got, because it's not a job that we, it's not a 9-to-5 job. I say this is a lifestyle rather than a career choice. And it's actually about keeping that lifestyle element open, and questioning the perspective of, we're not glorified babysitters. I've never sat on a baby in my life. And actually, it's challenging that professional identity of what we really are. I remember as a young practitioner working in a daycare program, and I was I was fortunate. I had a very supportive boss at the time, and they gave me it was 7:15 in the morning. I was working in a hospital, and I got handed this 6-month-old baby, and I was like, what do I do? I had the badge, I had the qualifications, but I was like, what do I do? And my colleagues were so supportive. I've never experienced any gender biased issues because I've always believed in what I'm doing. And getting back to this situation, at 7:15 in the morning to be handed a 6-month-old baby, and your age you work with is preschool, and you've done the child development and knowledge and think, I don't know what to do. They're crying, what do I do? What do I do? And as a dyspraxic person, I had to be kind of cautious that I didn't drop the baby or, extra thinking there going on. But we've got watered down qualification. Another point I want to make before I go, and thank you, Martyn, for that reminder, is our qualification these days are watered down. We have a watered down system where child development is not acknowledged enough. It's not acknowledged enough. It's not taken seriously. People think they can do a qualification within 1 year and be a certified educator. Our journey is a spiral. Our journey is a spiral. It's about really nurturing the process, our own process, and really taking acknowledgement of that moving forward. So guys, thank you very much for allowing me to be on here today. I look forward to learning from you all, and thank you for letting me share a little bit of my journey with you. And if you would like to see more of my work, please do tune in to Active Childhood UK and continue to share, because we teach children to share, but we don't do enough sharing ourselves.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rob. Fantastic. You can put, well done, Francis. Just a little clap icon up there. That's good. I think, some really important points you raised there, Rob. One of those things is that the hidden disability stuff. I once went to an autism training day, or professional learning development, and they said that the professions that most people on the spectrum end up in are the military, IT, and education, right? So there are many of us out there with these hidden disabilities, these ways of being, and it's not just the children, it's us as educators that need an acceptance of different ways of being. I think that's great. Thanks, Rob. So moving from the UK, early in the morning, wakey. Let's go to the land of the long white cloud, Aotearoa. And we'll talk to Max Christie next. We'll hear from Max. Max is a recently graduated early childhood teacher. Congratulations, it's nice to get through. As Rob's saying, sometimes we come from places that aren't expected. I didn't finish high school, Rob. So my grades at the end of the high school were nothing. So we can get there, right? So Max has just finished his early childhood degree. Fantastic. He's from Wellington on the North Island, lower part of the North Island in New Zealand. And he somehow got a job in child space. I don't know how that happened, Max, but maybe you can tell us some of that. So please welcome Max Christie from the New Zealand country.
Kia ora, everybody. Ko Max toku ingoa, ko Waipahi toku awa, ko Kaukau toku maunga, and thank you everybody for being here, and it's a real pleasure to be here. I am an early childhood teacher from Wellington. My parents are Tony and Robin Christie, who founded Child Space, which is a group of 5 early childhood centres in Wellington, New Zealand. And I work at one of those centres, and I also do professional development for different places. So I've done a few in New Zealand and also in California last year. So basically I am really passionate about men and early childhood because I am one of the few. And I wondered why that was, because I had always grown up with early childhood in my background, and I came to it quite late, but I did decide that I wanted to be a teacher and an early childhood teacher because of the importance of the first 1,000 days of anybody's life, and how important it is to really make a good connection with somebody at that age in order to learn and grow together with them. And I have found that my journey as a teacher has been one of learning and teaching, and it's always for me inextricably linked. And I feel that the children teach me as much about life as I do them. And that's a very important way that I feel elevated and uplifted in my own personal life, is from the inspiration that children can give me every day. So yeah, I'm also really passionate about men in early childhood because, when I got to my study, which was at Victoria University of Wellington, I was one of 4 males in a 70-person class, and I was a bit overwhelmed by that, but I thought, that's all right. But by the end of 3rd year, I was the only male in that class, and I realized that there hadn't been that many people drop out of the class, but all of the other males had, for different reasons. And I really didn't want to see this happen to the next year's intake. I wanted to see some sort of support that they could get. And so with my friend who I had convinced to come into the profession, he was signing up for his first year of study, and we thought we'd put together a club, and we called it Victoria University of Wellington EC Men's. And it was a group to support men who were studying in early childhood. After we'd sort of started that, we found that a bit of a barrier to the community that we were trying to create was the name itself, EC Men's, and it actually alienated the group in some way from the female participants in the course who we really wanted to get involved. And despite repeatedly saying this group is for everybody, we got a bit of a blowback. So we decided to have a name change because our ethos was more about quality and equality in education. And if we were going to get men who were quality, nurturing males, we needed the females that were studying with them to connect with them, to learn with them, to discuss things with them, so that a community of support is established that doesn't require a head figure. Instead, it is grassroots and everybody can be connected. And so with that first year group that we started the club with, all of the males who entered that course, 5 of them, have all made it to the 3rd trimester of the 3rd year, and hopefully they will all graduate next year. So it's been a really awesome first sort of incarnation of this group, but we changed the name to VUW ECeQuality because we wanted everybody on board, and we realized that we needed diversity within our own group if we were going to convince a wider audience that it was a good idea for men to study. There's so many issues to do with this, and there could be many theses written, so I'm not sure how much more I can say, but just a couple of points about well-being with men, because I feel like that's a very important topic for this particular conversation. In New Zealand, we have sort of 5 ways to well-being, and they involve connecting, learning, taking notice, giving, and being active. And I feel like these are all encapsulated within my job as an early childhood teacher. You're active all the time, you're always giving and taking and sharing, taking notice of what children are doing, and you're always learning, whether it be on the playground or in the office, on the computer, and just connecting with everybody, with parents, with leaders of our community, our unions. So that's another role that I've taken, is to try and make sure that ECE teachers are being paid fairly, and that is to do with a pay equity campaign that we're going through at the moment in New Zealand, to say that early childhood teachers have been historically underpaid because they've been viewed as a female profession. So I feel like it's very important to stand up for these causes, even though I am a male, and so I could be viewed as an outsider. I tend to view it more as I am part of that community, I can help to gain a higher reputation for the teaching profession. So yeah, I guess also another reason that we want to take the name men's out of it for our group is that we want to acknowledge that the non-binary nature of gender. So we're often referring to masculine and feminine energies, and this doesn't have to be a male and female, but really what we need is teachers that can bring both of those sides, the nurturing and the energetic and playful. So yeah, I guess to kind of sum up what I'm trying to say, I would say if we wish to establish a healthy male population without hatred or boredom or self-esteem anxiety, we must start by helping young boys and girls to play and learn together with positive male role models and positive female role models. Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant, thanks, Max. I'm impressed. I think you raise a really, really valid point. And for me, starting the mentor program, for me, I felt the same thing. But it's hard to work for a particular group of people without somehow alienating another group of people that you're trying to work alongside of, right? I think that's a really powerful move to change the name. And I think your acknowledgement of the non-binary nature of gender is something we need to be all mindful of. And rather than creating a either or kind of dichotomy, I think that is much more embracing. I've got to change my name, but I've already printed the poster, Max.
You got to get those posters changed last minute.
That's right.
Thanks,
that's right. And I love that you brought in the pedagogical aspects there too. I know Taiwhariki is one of my all-time favourite curriculums in the world, alongside the Nuri curriculum from Korea. Australian one's okay, EYLF. But, you know, the Taiwhariki, the fact that it is, you know, bilingual, the fact that it is encompassing of family really well. And those points you make about the action that we actually need to do as part of being an educator, I think those are really brilliant points, and I'm sure there'll be people champing at the bit to get in and get more out of you from that. So thank you for that, Max.
Thanks, Matty.
So from the lovely land of New Zealand, even though Max didn't put on his cricket shirt that I asked for, the classic brown on brown, so be it. That's okay. I won't bowl an underarm at you. We'll move now to the sunny land. Oh, I assume it's sunny there, Justin. That's what I know about California. We're going to move to the other side of the world, or somewhere up there in the northern hemisphere, to the United States. And is it Chico, the town where you're from, Justin? So Chico,
yes.
Yep, in California, where we have the brilliant Justin Margolis, and huge props to Greg Uber for putting me onto you, Justin, because I think you've got a really unique story. So I'll let you tell that story, but I just want to highlight for the fact that most of the brilliant male educators that I teach often have a life change. There's often a moment in their lives where they decide, and maybe it's fatherhood, maybe it's injury through work, or maybe it's, as Rob said, like a realization that this is something that I enjoy, but that moment where they switch. And I think you've got that story really brilliantly in your life. So I'll hand over to you, Justin. Go for it.
Thank you. I am thrilled to be here. Thank you, Greg Uber, for putting him onto me. Thank you for being here with such an amazing group of individuals. So I just feel honored. I also need to, recognize the injustices that are happening to, people of color in the United States right now. And part of what I do is to really use my voice to bring awareness to that. So I think that's also important. Being a person of biracial background, it's always a weird space to be sometimes, because as everyone can tell, I'm pretty light skinned, so I'm not white enough, I'm not dark enough, but I sit kind of that middle ground. So it's always important for me to bring that up and really highlight that as kind of the work I do and the person I am. So I just thought that was important to say that. A little about me. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. I'm 47 years old. I'm an only child to a teenage mom and a 25-year-old father. My mother, Laura, my father, Twill. Great people, but better separated, not together. So my story is one of a lot has happened in my life to get to these 47 years where I'm at today. it all started, I guess, I came to this field a little bit differently. I have been incarcerated as an adult. I've served time in prison for possession for sale of a controlled substance while carrying a loaded firearm. I did almost 3 years in prison on 2 different occasions. I did 4 years incarcerated as a minor. I've been homeless. I've been on drug addicted, gang violence, physical abuse, sexual abuse. What else? That's probably enough. I mean, it's a lot has happened at an early age. My life started out when it was normal. You know, I was living with my mother, a small family. And when I met my father when I was 10, so that's the first time I met my dad. And that's where my life took the initial first ever switch in path. I can distinctly remember when I was 10 years old, he was addicted to drugs. Well, I should probably rewind. First time I met him, it was great. My grandmother brought him down to Los Angeles from the Bay Area where he's from. He has a long history of drug abuse and things like that. So she brought him down and paid for the trip, which was great. Everything was perfect. He was on his best behavior. Anything a young man that doesn't have a father could ask for. I mean, it was perfect. Went up there a second time. It was great. He was living with this woman that had a couple of daughters, and he was still on his best behavior. So it was great then as well. I went back the third time, and that's when the train went off the tracks. That's when he was back in his active addiction. We lived in a small studio apartment, which was the size of probably a large bedroom, is where he lived. And so I had to witness, you know, drug addiction, domestic violence, him having sex with his girlfriend, alcoholism, running for the police, being abandoned, all these things in a short span of time that I had never been exposed to before with my mother in Los Angeles. So needless to say, that was a shock to my system and a shock to my brain. So I really didn't recover from that. I distinctly remember my mother saying when I got back that the child she sent away never came back. So the kid that came back was somebody totally different. And there was nothing in my life at that time, nothing that mattered except the pain I was feeling inside. So my mission, I felt like, was to hurt people, as many people as I could, because no one could hurt me as much as I guess I was already hurting. So that's kind of was my mission from that point on. And that got me to using drugs at 10 years old, 11 years old. That got me arrested, gangs, the whole thing until 14, where it was just too much for my mother to handle. And I was sent away to a youth facility where it was much better than being at home. I preferred to be there. I didn't want to go back home. I did things that caused me to stay there longer, which turned 6 months into 4 years until I was 18. And then I'm a legal adult, so they have to let me go. So that, all those challenges never stopped. I just went back to the street, went back to the violence, went back to everything. So eventually I went to AmeriCorps for a year, which is a service program here in the States. And that kind of gave me my first experience of maybe life isn't so bad. Maybe I could do things differently. Maybe I can really put my head down and work hard and make something of myself. But then once that was over, I moved up to Chico, where I'm at now. And everything I resorted to my old ways very, very quickly. Eventually, a couple years later, I was selling drugs at the time. I got arrested, was sent to prison. And while I was out fighting that case, I met a girl and she got pregnant. So here I am, another statistic. Now I just created another statistic of having a son. I had my son who's 21 now. He was born while I was in prison. So now, I got high A scores. My kid has a high A score now, and I'm just kind of, doing more damage as I'm going along. I did fine in prison the first time. It wasn't, somewhere where I was scared to be. It was somewhere where I expected to be. So when I got there, it wasn't like, oh, what did I do to myself? It was like, oh, well, I knew I'd be here eventually. It just took 24 years or so to get here. Well, I got out of prison, and when I went back to prison the second time, somewhere along that second prison sentence of mine, I think I was about 28 or so. I just remember looking at this long hallway of the dorm of 88 prisoners, including me, all bunk beds, 44 on each side, and just being like, this is it. I just can't, this is it for me. I refuse to do this again. I refuse to come back to prison. I will never come back again. This is it. you know, and that was the first time in my life that I actually felt and really felt it deep down inside, like that's it for me. I still had about a year to go in prison, but that last year or so was kind of easy. I mean, I didn't have any problems. I did what I was supposed to do. I got out. I paroled to a rehab here in Chico, and somehow it just started to make sense. You know, I got a job 4 months out, and I had that job for 12 and a half years, which was at a screen printing company, and it gave me a chance. And kind of within the work I do, that's some of the things that the men I work with need, is that just that initial opportunity to kind of have a foundation under them. When I got out of prison, I had another child with this woman, and he's 17 now. You know, and as the world does its thing to kind of make us realize what's going on and make us wake up, I became a full-time single parent when my youngest son was 15 months old. And so I'm a 31-year-old man or 30 or so trying to now raise a 15-month-old son with zero life skills, zero ability to raise this kid. But I'm like, all I can do is just do what I need to do my best. And that, I think, really gave me the opportunity to wake up, gave me opportunity to kind of realize that I need to be a better person for me. I need to be a better person for my youngest son, and do everything I can. Eventually, my second son came to live with me, so I was a single parent of 2 children. And the agency I work for paid for my childcare. So that's what they kind of do. They help families pay for childcare if they can't afford it. And so they knew I was going to school. I had this really good rapport with them. I was raising my kid. I decided to go back to school. And then all of a sudden, when my caseworker was like, Justin, we have this new program. We think you'd be great to lead it for us. And it was called the Parent Cafe program, which is based on the Strengthening Families Framework and the 5 protective factors. And so I was like, yeah, sure. You know, I can do it. And so I did that job, and it really also gave me an opportunity to grow up and really learn about myself a little bit more. And along that way, I started working with other fathers who were incarcerated in a group called Inside Out Dad. And so that's where I go into the jail. I work with fathers to be better fathers, because 95% of people in jail are eventually going to get out and back to the streets. So I really feel like I came to this profession the roundabout way, where all my streets smarts, all my personal adversity, everything I've been through has given me the strength, the knowledge, the understanding to go and work with families in my community, because I can go in there and say, I understand what you've been through. We're in this together. Let's do this together. I can be, you know, the person they need to look up to. I can be the example to make it. And so it's really kind of been a blessing for me, although I'm not super religious, I say that word, but it's been a gift for me to kind of do this work and really give back, because I've taken so much from the world. I've done a lot of damage, and now I feel like I'm giving back to men in the world, to children who look up to these fathers. Also running boot camp for new dads, which brings men who have just had children together with men who are going to have children in the next couple of months to really kind of learn off of each other. So all my work is really community focused, community based, really meeting with men and really trying to strengthen them. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't ramble on too much, but it's really a pleasure. And thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Justin. Like your story is an inspiration to many, I would imagine. For many of us, and early childhood education isn't just something that happens in a classroom or something that happens in a kindergarten or a childcare centre. It's as Brom from Brenner would have said, it's interacting with whole levels in community and society. And I think, you know, your experience will help a whole range of fathers and children to move past some of those challenges. For me, it speaks of trauma-informed practice. You know, you had an experience as a child that has impacted you for a long time, and somehow you found that thing to get away from it and to move forward and to use it effectively. I think that's brilliant. I too am not very religious, but I think you have a gift. You have a gift that is required in this world that we live in now, which is seems to be steeped in discrimination and hurtful things for others. So I think you can bring something really powerful to that. So thank you. And people are asking about the program that you mentioned. Was it Inside Out Dad?
Yes. Yeah,
Yep.
that's the one I go to the jail and kind of work with them to be better fathers.
Yep, brilliant. Thank you. And I'm sure even after this finishes, I'm sure we can find some links. Glenn's been putting heaps of links up there for everyone to follow, each person's story and ideas, but I'm sure there'll be more that comes out after that. Our final speaker has managed to get away from work. Well done. I want to introduce you to Craig Darcy, the only person on the panel I've met in person. It's an interesting fact. So I met Craig, I knew about Craig's work for many years as being the sort of don't take this the wrong way, Craig, like the godfather of men in early childhood in Australia. Too big a claim, I don't know. But he's done some amazing work across Australia, out of the eastern states. And I had the privilege of meeting Craig in New Zealand for the Early Childhood Men's Conference, probably 4 or 5 years ago now, Craig. Where I heard Craig speak and to say some really powerful things about what is needed in terms of supporting a diverse workforce in Australia. So he's coming to us. Are you at school at the moment, Craig?
I am, yes.
Yeah, so Craig's coming to us from Mullumbimby and he's still at work.
Yeah.
So I'll hand over to you, Craig. Got about 10 minutes, go for it.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Martyn. Hi, everyone. Hope you can hear me okay, Martyn. And yeah, great. I've got the kookaburras in the background.
Perfect.
Okay, so I began my journey in early childhood when I was 18. I began study straight after school. I was the only male in my course, which is a common story for a lot of men who are getting into the field. And 3 weeks into the course, after I failed the doll bathing exam, I passed the doll on by its leg to the next person, and was told, if that's how you're going to look after our dolls, how can you be trusted to look after children? Anyway, I was reluctantly placed in a maternity hospital for a practical placement. So the goal of that placement was to actually view a live birth. So that was quite an experience, and I was standing up in the back of the room. The mother gave permission for me to observe, and the doctor came in when everything was happening, and I was introduced as Craig, the student, and he asked me what year I was in. I was very nervous. I said first year, and I didn't know you did obstetrics in your first year, he said. And I said, I'm just doing childcare, actually. And that was my fumbling first few weeks into the field. Other than that, what really helped me was actually knowing of one other experienced male early childhood professional. His name was Phil. And he was an inspiration for me because he was the only one that I knew in the whole, anywhere. He'd had his family and left a job in a bank and became an early childhood teacher. So he gave me a lot of inspiration, and I actually did what sort of was a turning point for me after those few very difficult couple of months starting off. He got me to come with him to his preschool and do another a three or 4 week block with him. So to actually have that role model and to have another male who I could see was being successful, being well, relating well to the children and vice versa, and being very well accepted by the parents was something that really hit home for me, and I could see that there was a place. I was questioning all the time, is there a place for me in this field? Always sort of coming across challenges in that way. But I have to say that having that role model really turned the corner for me, and I knew that I could do it. And so, I made my way through that course, and this was, I'm 50 now, so 32 years ago, I was actually qualified. The qualification was called a mothercraft nurse, which was an interesting interesting qualification to have as a 20-year-old young guy, but it basically meant a childcare worker. And So I worked in centres for a number of years, and then went on and did further study when I had my family and that kind of thing. So yeah, I began some work at the University of Newcastle close to 20 years ago now, and I was able to establish a network for men who work in the early childhood field in Australia. And so that became a group known as Blokes Can Do It as well. And yeah, that was an opportunity for us to meet, as you say, face-to-face is important. To meet face-to-face we met for years, for every 6 weeks on a Monday night from 6 till 8 o'clock, and discussed all sorts of relevant issues, and it became a social group, but also a group for professional development. And we invited female colleagues along as well. A lot of females are interested in the male experience, I suppose. And yeah, we talked about a lot of relevant issues, but also brought young men who were coming into the field into that group, and set up like a mentoring partnership with an experienced male and a new student who, because quite often when that young, or not necessarily young, but when a male is sort of becoming into a course and it's all new, that's a point where they could leave before they even get through their training. So that's seen as a really important function that experienced men can play. Yeah, there became many topics that were common to all. Probably child protection issues was the main, or is the main kind of issue, and keeping children safe obviously is number one, but also keeping yourself safe. When you're working in a centre or a preschool or a service is probably the number one sort of topic that I've found that men want to talk about. And yeah, so what we're seeing in Australia is that the percentages of men are remaining fairly static, perhaps growing a tiny bit at a time, not a lot, yes, that much, incremental increases, and it hasn't changed since I started. It's hovering maybe around 2.5% or something like that. And what's happening in Australia in the field is that the demand for early childhood is growing. So there's a situation where the demand is growing. More services are being established. More children are coming into early childhood, every day in different services. But also what's happening is that there are mandated need for more qualified people. And also too, what's happening at the same time is that around 15% of staff are actually turning over every year. So we've got a situation where the industry is growing and the staff are leaving, about 1 in 6 every year. So in various government policy and government ideas, looking at the workforce is a major issue. The difficulty is that men haven't been identified specifically as potentially being able to fill those positions and being invited in. It is hoped for, and when men come in, they're accepted, definitely. But I feel or have seen that men need to be specifically invited, and there's examples of that around the world that have been very successful. So I'm part of the World Forum in Early Childhood Care and Education, the leadership group for men in early childhood education. So that's been a journey since 2008. So meeting with men from North America, from Europe, different European countries, and just getting exposure to different ideas, and as Martyn said, also the fellows in New Zealand, our we're the small island to the east of New Zealand, and our New Zealand counterparts are an amazing bunch who are, because it's such a small and tight-knit group, they're very, very well organised and do great work over there as well. So Australia has the difficulty of being so spread out and sparsely populated that it makes it difficult for events to happen and for men to come together. This is a great way to do it online. And yeah, there's been, as I said, some successful things overseas in Scotland. There's a fellow called Kenny Spence who for years has been running men-only childcare courses, for example. A few European governments, such as in Norway, Denmark, have policies in place to try and increase the numbers of men and actually having targeted figures that they're hoping to achieve. Looking at the different model or structure of services as well can sometimes attract more men. For example, in Norway, there's a large push, and it has been for a number of years, for outdoor-based preschools. And I was lucky enough to visit over there a few years ago now, and around a third of the staff in those outdoor-based preschools are male. So that sort of structure seems to attract more men into those sort of service types. So yeah, I'm currently the coordinator of a small community-based preschool. I'm called the Rooster in the Hen House by my female colleagues in a joking way, and yeah, it's all going well. So I can see changes need to be made. I can see that there are examples such as what Martyn has developed through his program, Mentor. There are things happening, and we've got a long way to go. So thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Craig. Yes, yes. And congratulations to all our speakers for sharing your unique perspectives. I think the interesting thing about men working with young children is that we are a diverse bunch. And I think, who was it that said that? Someone said you had to be a little bit crazy. Jeff, you said that you looked a bit crazy, but you'll do. The male educator seems to be the crazy one in the school or the preschool sometimes. And I think what Craig hit on there is perhaps some of the synergy between the male educator persona and reasonable risk, bush play, loose parts play, all those sorts of things that seem to be coming into vogue seem to be things that align neatly with men's views of education. I'm not sure if that's a thing, whether that's a stereotypical thing or not, but I think there's something there that, our role is sometimes to have children take risks with things that perhaps our female colleagues, and not all female colleagues, but some female colleagues feel a bit challenged by. Not all. I don't like to create the black and white dichotomy there, but there's certainly a trend. So now is our time. I've got questions that I can ask and lead it like a silly old university tutorial, but I think it might be more powerful if you have a question that you want to ask each of these four brilliant men, or to ask for a bit more information on, or their perspective on something you're thinking about. Put your hand up. You know how to do the hand up function on Zoom, or you can just speak and I'll let you go. So up to you how you want to roll it. Because I don't want it to get too technical and me-like.
Can I ask a question, please?
Of course.
Sorry, I don't have the hand up function. That's why you've got the clap. I just wondered, I've wrote it actually in the messages. What are unis and schools doing to promote men into going to university here in Australia?
Great. Anyone want to jump in on that one, or is that more of a me thing, given I'm representing universities in this group of 5 people. I know for me, I speak at all open days. I speak at all open days, and I can try and convince a large amount of people that if they haven't come here for early childhood, then this is the right thing. Having said that, I have to be really honest with a lot of those people and say it can be a tough gig. You know, part of my job in bringing people into the university to study early childhood teaching is to weed those out that probably shouldn't be doing it. If you're not here for the right reasons, then there are other things for you to do. And that is the challenge. Creating a gender diverse teaching workforce requires a larger number of men to choose from, right? But those men have to be high quality teachers first and foremost. So I do things at open days and things like that. I've toyed with the idea of going to high schools and talking to high school students about pathways into early childhood teaching. I don't know if anyone else has got anything to add to that.
I actually think that going to the high schools, I've worked with high schools quite a lot myself. I think that would be a fantastic idea, because I don't think a lot of young men feel that it's an area that they can actually go into.
Yeah, can I jump in on that? I agree entirely. And from our perspective in Wellington, New Zealand, our group focused first of all on the men who are studying, but then we realised that we needed to convince young men in high schools. And so we have been going out to visit high schools to try and, if you like, recruit men. But it's important because you're right, not many men find out about early childhood until they actually go into an early childhood centre as a father. It's not often a first choice career for men, and we need to change that.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Max. I know this might link between Justin and Max here, but in New Zealand, there is a fantastic program. I'm not sure if it's still being funded, called the Y Men Project.
Yep.
Where young men who are at risk of going down the wrong path are paid to go to study early childhood education. And fantastic, great young guys. So that's something that's being done in that space a little bit.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And I think one of the things that's missing in New Zealand, because our rate is still just as low as anywhere else in the world, is that our public policy has yet to delve into the issue of men in early childhood and say that it is important for men to be teachers. No one yet has come out and said that in terms of where we need to go, where we want to go in our strategic plan for our national education system. It didn't mention that the need for more males. It didn't mention the need for more teachers. And I think one way to get public policy going around this is to say, like Craig said, men are not often targeted as people that can fill these roles, but in fact we should be asking the question, promoting the idea, encouraging them that it is something they can do, rather than letting them find it through some abstract path.
Yeah, it requires money, and it requires government policy push, right? Germany chucked a lot of money at this, and they saw some improvement to about 5 to 10%, I think. So it can be done, but yeah, the message needs to be out there for young men to realise it's possible.
It seems like society itself. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it seems like society itself needs to be educated a little bit more about the benefits of men in children's life to begin with. Because there's that stigma that there must be something wrong with you, or something along those lines, for you to want to work with kids. You want to be in a daycare center. You want to be a teacher. And I think that that's really problematic, because there's a lot of people that probably do want to do this work and do want to get into it, but they don't want to deal with the repercussions of parents being like, why do you want to be around children so young? Or why do you want to do this? I think there has to be just an overhaul of the system. Because I was saying in one of the messages here at Chico State, I've only maybe seen 1 or 2 young men in the early childhood education field. And that's problematic, because you're not getting good representation of men who can be sensitive, who can talk, who can play, who can fill all these different roles, especially if there's not already a young man or a man in a young person's life. And then we come to the position of people of color as well, which is a whole nother aspect, I think, that has to be addressed to really get more people involved.
Yeah, I agree, Justin. I've engaged in a search for the Aboriginal male early childhood educator in Australia. There aren't, if there are 2% men in early childhood, you're probably 2% of those 2% who are Indigenous. There's a great guy called Adam Duncan that I tried to get into this, but he was too busy. But to find diversity within the male early childhood ranks is important too, right? Yeah. Great. Any other questions people want to raise? Paul? Got to demute yourself, mate.
Yeah. So I got a few renovations going on in the background, a bit noisy here. Just an interesting observation, like several years ago, there was an attempt to set up a male-specific course in Queensland. Mark can probably speak to this as well, to try and attract more men into the childcare industry. Well, I think at that stage it was mentioned that it was only about 4% of men in the whole industry, very much female dominated. And to set up that male-specific course, it had to be approved by the Anti-Discrimination Commissioner or someone in that role in Queensland. And it was turned down because it would have been deemed to be prejudicial to women, like disadvantageous to women to have a male-only course. I wonder how we get past that entrenched bureaucratic attitude that no, it isn't a role for men. There seem to be like higher levels of bureaucracy seem to have that attitude that it's not a place for men. When we talk so much about women sort of being allowed into male-dominated industries. So I wonder if anyone has any answers to that or any observations about how we overcome that.
Yeah, I mean, would you set up a school that offered a course for only female fighter pilots? I don't know. I mean, is that a fair representation of what we're trying to achieve here by setting up a male-specific course? What you're doing is putting a whole bunch of males in the same room and saying you're a minority, so work together for a year and then go out and actually realize the reality of the situation, which is that you've got 98% of your fellow workers are female, and so you have to learn to actually be in that space from your study. But you do need support from other men, but you do not, I don't think it's fair to have a male only stream, and I think it's actually furthering the issue of the separation between the genders.
I guess I'll just speak to that, Max, because I was the teacher that wanted to lead that.
Yeah.
The thing is, when I put it forward to my manager at the college where I was working, I knew the benefit of having men in childcare. The children need, really positive role models, male role models. And I knew that every time I had men in my childcare course when I was teaching, and like, was said before about the quality of those men, they were snapped up. And we were looking at it more about trying to get men to come and study. And we thought maybe because it was such a female-dominated classroom, that may put men off to come and study in that environment. And, we would run alongside other classes. So, yes, there would have been the group work where they worked with female students and things like that. But it was more just to get those males into childcare. And I mean, I've got a young male in my class now, came straight from high school to me, and he loves it. The staff love him. He just sent me an email today saying, as soon as I finish my course, they're going to employ me full time. And my thing is, I want more of that. I want more of those young men, not just middle-aged, and I'm nothing against it, but all age groups of men working in childcare. And to me, that was one way we may have been able to do it, is to just not have that female-dominated classroom, but to run it alongside the other classes as well. But yeah, it was knocked on the head. It was deemed as discriminatory straight off the top of
I feel like the idea, though, is exactly right, and it is that men need to get together with other men. And that is an aspect that you can provide in your teacher education through whether it be a student-led group like my own group in Wellington, or whether it be through a group that is mandated by the university. But these classes need to be attended by everybody. This course needs to be the same, because that's what we're fighting for as men, is equality in the field rather than special treatment. I think most men prefer...
And it was never about that. It was more about just trying to get more men into childcare. That was the premise of it, without any shadow of a doubt, and hoping.
And we need innovation.
We
need innovation.
Anyway, we're just trying to get, I do too. I go to high schools now, and trying to get all these young men to realise. Can I just say though, and you probably back me up, the biggest issue is pay. For a young man to go in to do childcare or early childhood is the pay issue. It's
one of the big three.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Pay is one. What I call the breadwinner argument. You've got to have money on the table, and we need to do a lot of work across the board in early childhood for that one. Two is the societal stuff that I think we've all sort of touched on, is that some people see it as women's work and it's not true. And the third one is the fear of, losing your career over someone making an accusation. That is a huge fear for many men. And I think some don't even come near early childhood because of that.
Absolutely. And at an orientation or an information session, that is one of the first questions I always get asked.
Yep.
Is it okay? Will I be accepted? Will I be able to do the job? And those sorts of things, they are always the first question. And, my answer is you'll get snapped up. If you do a good job, they will employ you. And I would say 99% of my male students get employed because they want positive role models into working with children.
I'd say it gets more risky and more challenging the older you are as a male in early childhood. Seeing an old bloke working with young children, people look at that in a different way to perhaps a young bloke. So I don't know whether that risk increases, that feeling of tension perhaps. But I don't know. Rob, you're a young bloke. Do you feel it?
Like I said, I've been very fortunate. And the only I was just thinking back on early days, and really I think it's the need to... People often say to me about would I prefer more men in the field, or would I prefer a quality workforce? And we need to acknowledge the fact that there aren't enough men in the industry. But is that the most pressing issue with the way our early care and education is at the moment? Is this the more... I think there's more pressing issues to be had, and almost maybe it's because I've been working on the front line in a daycare environment. You have to adapt. You have to adapt, and you have to be flexible. And I was just a little story I want to share with you. I lost my grandmother to dementia, and she had a male carer who worked in the nursing home. And I was having a conversation with him about, prejudice and things. And he said, I do not have any prejudice against me. People respect me because I'm a medic. I'm a medic. So what we need to be looking at is valuing our skill set. Valuing our skill set and really believing in what we're doing. And this guy, he was, he'd been in the profession for over 20 years. And he said to me, actually, you wouldn't look twice at a female doctor. So why are we looking at men like we're some sort of alienated force that's to be had? Obviously, societal issues play a part in that, but we're living in 2020. We're not, it's time for change.
Some of us aren't living in 2020, unfortunately. There are too many around who have those negative and antiquated views, Rob, I'm afraid. But yeah, you make a really strong point that it's the role of the educator needs to be more valued in society, I think.
And that is the key issue, because I mean, when teaching is valued, that's when men will step up to do that job, because it's not actually completely to do with the pay. You're right, it is one of the reasons, but the societal status of a teacher is something that is very important. It will determine whether or not we have an equal amount of men and women in the field. And just to sort of bring it to a New Zealand standpoint, we have many writers from the Māori tradition, the indigenous community here, that talk about the respect and the mana that it took to become a kaiako, or a teacher, and that this was upheld by the whole community, but also that the roles of caring and educating were equally shared between men and women. And that is something that we need to learn from our own indigenous community to reflect in our current system, is a respect for teaching, and with that comes a respect for both genders within that role, and all in between.
Yeah, Max, you made a good point there. I think it's also respecting the value of care and, title or professional identity there. We are carers, we are educators, and that edu-care balance, per se, what is our role? We are educators, we are carers. And actually, care doesn't trump education, and education doesn't trump care. And I think, when people say, oh, I work in childcare, they look at the negative connotations with that, but there's plenty of positives that come with that balance as well.
Yeah,
I think we need to have more, what's incentive plans to begin with, I think, to make it more incentivized to get more young people, men especially, into the field, free schooling or things like that. And once they leave, maybe come back and be able to teach, the next folks coming up, because if you're going to get the education, then you leave and there's going to be no one that these young students could look up to. But I also think here in the States, there's really a stigma against it. Like it's really tough, because the question is, why do you want to do that? Instead of, oh, kids can really benefit from it. They can really learn something from you. It's more, why are you doing this? And I'm not sure how long that's been going on, but I know my first, recollection of really men being questioned was, I think I forgot the name of the daycare center in Los Angeles years ago, McMartin or something like that, where it was a family-run place, and some parents accused the men, the guys who were working there, of molestation of children, and it just took over. They found out that they didn't do anything wrong. Everything was fine. The kids were being not planted, but guided along with what to say. And it seemed like, I think that was in the 90s. And it just, from then on, it was just downhill, And so it's, when the number starts, curving down and people really want to do it, but then they're discouraged because no matter what you do, it feels like it's an uphill battle just because of a passion you have. I think that's where the problem begins for us here. But if you can start getting people young enough, incentivizing it, saying, we'll pay for college, we'll help you through this, we'll, kind of start having people in the roles of leadership, making those decisions and helping people on to guide them. I think that's what will start changing that, because people, men are scared to do it. It's just, it's a fear that it's like, someone can say anything, and then all of a sudden you're allowed to defend yourself for something that's a passion. And I think that's problematic.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I think, that example, it's reflective of many sort of situations across all four of the countries represented by our speakers. And I think particularly of New Zealand, and he who shall not be named, the man who similarly got accused, and I won't mention it because I don't want to be negative, but we saw men in early childhood drop from a healthy 3% down to less than 1% because of one incident that, tarnished the role of the man in early childhood for many years.
Interestingly, that case is being tried now in New Zealand. It's being appealed, and it's very interesting because I did read about it in my studies, and it's similar to your case there, Justin. Very similar. In fact, all of those details you listed, same thing happened to this man in the same time frame, and the same thing happened to our societal view of men in early childhood. But it's important now that we look towards the future, and that our new educators need to be ready to be professionals and to be clear about their goals and to be committed to relationships with whānau, with family, and children, so that you can get to a point where they respect you and they understand that you are out for the right reasons, and because you can explain yourself as a professional. Very important.
Yeah, theory is important.
Kind of. I mean, and being relational and being clear.
That's theory too. That's theory too, Max. Relational. The foundation of good education is relations, right? We're early childhood. We know this.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure how much time we got left here, Glenn. Whether you wanted to finish with a question or something, or I think this is just the start of the conversation. There's so much more to talk about. I want to talk about why Nick Hansen's got Dixit cards as his profile picture there. That reminds me of having a good board game. It's fantastic. Sorry.
A wealth of knowledge.
Squirrel.
I've been looking at Nick's avatar for 4 weeks now, on and off. It's been a regular, and you've named what it is. So
yeah, I play the game. Also wondering why the Dad's group is sideways, but
yeah, we need to come to that because Tom's actually asked in the next session, and I think either we all have to turn sideways to be in. Now he's joined us. Yeah.
Hey.
No, I mean, really interesting session. Have you got a sort of a final question for the panelists you want to round off with? You have a way of concluding that you've got a song or something?
God, I'll pull out the ukulele if I was in New Zealand. Max, you've probably got your ukulele there, haven't you? Look, I just want to finish because I think, we are a small part of a bigger thing that Glenn's been doing. Glenn's probably hasn't slept much over the last 4 weeks, no doubt. But men's health and the focus on supporting men in early childhood through their well-being is critical. Getting them in, keeping them there is one thing, but when we have men who perhaps feel isolated because they're the only man there, or don't feel they've got a support, or get accused of something that they didn't do, that has a wear and tear effect on men generally. So I think we need to be really mindful of men's mental health and well-being. The suicide rates for men are pretty horrendous. So I'm not sure how we're represented in that as educators. But I just want to highlight that we're a small part of that bigger picture for men's health and particularly for those who are in minority areas. Really important. I'm not sure whether that's a question. I think it's a statement.
No, well, I think it's a useful one just to lean into just a little bit and say there is a reason why we've had this conversation in this broader men's health space. And when we talk about men's health, we're not just talking about, prostate cancer and smoking. We're talking about the social factors that shape men's health. We're talking about working to improve the lives and the health of men and boys. And I haven't quite fully formulated or articulated how this caring piece fits into it, but it clearly does. And it's something to do with diversity of expression for men. It's about that. I came into this space myself as an at-home dad 20 odd years ago. So I've long had an interest into the kind of, the barriers and the stereotypes and things around men and leaning into the caring, nurturing spaces in life. And what I've seen, and I think still the case, is that while we've had this huge diversification of women's roles from, around about the 60s, well, even the Second World War, but certainly around from the 60s onwards. There's lots of ways you can measure that diversification where you don't see an equal and opposite diversification of men's roles. which does show up here very starkly in the gender segregation, or with the number of dads who are at-home dads, or if you want to go more sort of father's rightsy, the number of, separated dads who get custody. There's lots of different ways of slicing the demographics and identifying that either men aren't stepping into that realm, or there's barriers against men stepping into that realm. And so for me, whilst I haven't fully worked out how that fits into men's health in a really simplistic way around, things like life expectancy or risk of suicide, the ability for men to actually have that range of choices, particularly for a younger generation coming through, is a really important part of how we live our lives, I feel. In and of itself, for men, full stop. And it's also a really interesting part of how we create a more gender equal and diverse world as well. But I think, we often get into this conversation and think about how can we do something with men that improves outcomes for women. How is it better for women if more men take care of the kids, or more men come into these professions? And that's important. But I also think it's really important just to focus on, why is it valuable to men, just for its own sake, for men to be more involved fathers, to have the opportunities to work in childcare, to be involved in nursing and all the rest of it. So I don't have a definitive answer, but it's a really important conversation for us to lean into. And I'm really pleased to see all these amazing men as part of this conversation, and to hear the women contributing to it too. So thanks for being in our space and bringing these amazing conversations and this international flavour to the broader conversation we're having this week about men's health.
Brilliant. Thank you, Glenn. And I want to add to that too. So thank you for everyone who came in and joined our conversation. It feels like we need to talk more. So I think we need to do something more beyond this point, and have some sort of, like Craig was saying before he dashed off, some regular point of just chatting about these things, so that we can put those arguments forward to government, put those arguments forward to society in some way, to say, you know what, education needs us as part of the bigger picture. And at this point is where Glenn rips open his T-shirt and there's a Superman symbol there, I believe.
That was last week when we had a fancy dress party on Friday. This week it's a quiet night in front of X Factor or something. And look, we don't have to have the answers either, Marty, I think, but it's important to have the conversations, because I'm really learning that more and more this week. These kind of like open-ended conversations where we don't necessarily know where it's going. We don't have a sort of set presentation, where we just leap into the unknown a little bit and allow conversations to unfold are really valuable, because that's where new understanding emerges.
Brilliant. So for those that are leaving us, congratulations, thank you, wonderful, love you. Be safe, look after each other in this new world we live in, whether you're locked down or, like here in Adelaide, going out and partying, because we can now. Whatever your world is, be safe, be kind to each other. There is another session following this if you want to stay on. Really deep learning to be had. I think you've got an individual. Is it Mark speaking next individually?
No, we've got Tom Docking from Dad's Group. Dad's Group's an amazing initiative which is providing support for new fathers. So we're in that kind of, new dads being involved in care kind of conversation. And then at 3:15, we've got a panel with men in nursing, men in care, another early childcare education worker. And Mark, who's got 6 kids and has had experience of being an at-home dad as well. So all of that to come.
Yep. 6 kids and still has his own hair.
Amazing, isn't it? You want to find out what the secret sauce is?
I'm gone, mate. I'm past that point.
I know some of us are gone already.
Yeah. Now Mark, he'll tell his own story, but I believe he had a young child at the point where one child had already left home, and my daughter's 23 and I love her so much, but the thought of taking on the challenge of fatherhood again now is like, it's not, a lot of respect for that man. I'm looking for
Mark, you were nearly out.
Yeah, you need
I got 3 teenager adults at home, so I'm keen to be free.
Wonderful. Well, thanks Marty for this conversation. It's been brilliant.
Thanks everyone.
Rob,
Thank you,
it's
Martyn.
now.
Rob,
thank
go
you
get
for
some sleep.
4 a.m.
Thank you.
Justin, thank you for joining us at 10 p.m. or whatever it is now in the States. Max,
Thank you for having me.
over from New Zealand, and thank you for Craig, who's left up in the 1970s in Mullumbimby.
Thank you.